So many people here probably already know Nadine from the time she has spent with us at the Champlain Hospice Palliative Care Program, but we are very happy to welcome you back today, Nadine, to share with us your program today and some information and exercises and your wisdom. But for, as a reminder to people, maybe people who do not know you, Nadine is now a full-time coach, an educator, and a mindfulness teacher living here in Ottawa. And hard to believe looking at you, but Nadine has 30 years of experience in health and community and palliative care. And Nadine's been specializing in supporting healthcare teams to improve care delivery, integrating a palliative approach to care in the settings that they are working in, and also helping teams prioritize well-being while navigating emotionally demanding work. So we appreciate you being here and sharing some of your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Blair started us off with so many insights and touching on some of the things that we can do to support ourselves in moments of stress. So I hope to build on that. And before I get started, I also wanted to acknowledge that unfortunately my colleague Kate couldn't be here today. But I appreciate her many contributions as I was putting this together and sharing her perspectives as a clinician at the bedside and pulling that together with my perspectives as a coach working with healthcare teams. So I do this with much appreciation for her and with much appreciation for the work that you all do. Palliative care and healthcare is near and dear to my heart. And thank you for everything that you do. So I also want to acknowledge that we're a pretty big group and we want to try and make this a little interactive. So please continue to add things in the chat. If you're comfortable coming off mute, I'm going to be relying on Tara and the team to help me monitor the chat or see if anybody has their hands up. And this is also a group with a lot of expertise and experience. So if you have something to share that's worked for you as you are managing stress, please do feel free to share that. And on the screen that the team had up ahead of time, there was a link to a handout that I've shared, and we're going to be working through the handout a little bit later. But don't worry if you can't print that out for some reason, then just pen and paper is great if you have access to that. And if not, then just feel free to sit with it, think about it, go back to the handout afterwards. So lots of different options. So I want to start with an invitation to nurture yourself. We're going to be spending the next couple hours together. I want you to be comfortable. This is an opportunity for self-care. So thinking about the space that you're in, wherever that is there one little thing that you could do to make yourself just a little bit more comfortable, to make this feel just a little bit better? I invite you, if you want to, stand up, keep your camera on or off, close your eyes, go get a cup of tea, whatever you need to do in the next couple hours so that you're learning as well as taking care of yourself in whatever combination you want that to be. I also invite you to maybe set an intention for yourself. What are you hoping to get out of our time together this morning? Do you have a particular question? Is there something that you're hoping we explore? And again, if you're comfortable, I invite you to add that in the chat or to come off mute and share that so that I can try and make sure that we touch on something that's important to you in this session, or when we have time for question and answer afterwards, to maybe highlight some resources that might be helpful. So is there anything anybody wanted to share or ask before we get going that you're really hoping to get out of this session? What drew you to coming and spending time here this morning? Realistic tips on how to respond, setting a calm and positive tone for the week ahead. I think we can do that. Okay. How to avoid burnout at work. Teach me, teach. Okay. An opportunity for self-care, space for learning, dealing with feelings of overwhelm. So we will try and touch on all of that. And if we don't get to it in a way that's helpful to you, again, we can come back to that at the end. So what we're going to be covering today, and this touches on a lot of what was mentioned right now in the chat. So we're going to talk a little bit more about understanding how our internal signals and how, when we suppress those, it contributes to feeling depleted. And recognize our own stress responses and default patterns. We all often have a typical way of responding that shows up again and again. And then we can use metaphor to help kind of create a bit of a shorthand for ourselves so that we catch ourselves in those moments of stress, in our default response, so that we can choose a different response and start to cultivate new neural pathways that allow us to attend to our feelings in a different way. And we'll bring that all together, hopefully in a bit of a personalized toolkit so that you have something to take away with you and practice and experiment with. So we're going to start by sharing a bit of a story about a healthcare provider, Sally, who's a dedicated palliative care professional, strives to provide compassionate care for all of the people that she supports. And in addition to her professional role, she has a busy home life, 2 young kids, balancing a lot of responsibilities. Her workday often extends beyond kind of traditional hours, shall we say, or being on call, being involved often in highly emotional moments, critical decision making, providing support for colleagues, for families, for patients. And the cumulative effect of these responsibilities was leading to physical and emotional exhaustion and a sense of being overwhelmed, diminished capacity to care for herself and others. And as I'm talking about this, and as Blair was talking this morning, I'm sure you're starting to hear some things that sound familiar. This experience is not unique. Many healthcare providers are feeling this in a system that's stressed and stretched. So I want to recognize that, part of this connection and this community that Blair was talking about is also in recognizing that this is a very human, normal thing that we're experiencing, you're experiencing doing the work that you do. And when this cumulative stress continues to kind of layer upon layer upon layer, For Sally, it meant increasing irritability, feeling a sense of detachment, noticing declining energy, increasing frustration, feeling overwhelmed, and also not recognizing these as signs of burnout. Although I hesitate in using that term now that I've learned from Blair about how we use that as a catch-all. But so go with me now. We'll just use it as a catch-all for the moment. But not recognizing these as signs of needing to attend to this accumulation of stress. Um, and saying things like, I'll stop when it slows down, or if I can just get a little bit of extra sleep on the weekend, or once this is done, I'll have time to rest. Or if I take a break now, everything will fall apart, or I'll be fine once things settle down. So, I'm curious, does any of this sound familiar? What are some of the things that you maybe say to yourself when you're experiencing accumulation of stress and just trying to push through and get through your day? Any go-to phrases? Feel free to pop those in the chat. The other thing that often comes up when you find yourself in this struggle of an accumulation of stress is thinking about, well, other people seem to have it all under control. Or somebody says in the chat, I've been through worse. Other people have it worse than me too. I should just be able to manage this. What is wrong with me? So Sally hit a breaking point. This accumulation of stress and this constant practice of pushing through, one day at a time. I can do this, go with the flow. But it led to this persistent emotional and physical exhaustion with no clear cause that she could see. And this growing detachment and irritability, lack of energy, and continuing to prioritize work and family over her own well-being. And it got to the point where Sally was feeling immobilized for days, feeling unable to engage or recover. So her focus on caring for everyone else around her led to her feeling like she couldn't contribute in the way that she really wanted to. But she was also feeling embarrassed and unsure about what what to call this or how to recognize it. And she had a bit of a turning point when she was asked to list her top 3 priorities. And she named her kids, her husband, and work. And realizing that she wasn't even on the list. So how could she expect to feel okay? She wasn't even on the list. And she got sick. And not the kind of, life-ending sick or life altering sick that we often work with in palliative care, but the kind of sick of like not being able to get off the couch and feeling like this just wouldn't go away, and having moments maybe of being able to rally and then falling back down to the couch. And this moment was pivotal for her because she realized that this absence of herself on the list wasn't, nothing was ever going to change unless she put herself back on the list. And so at this breaking point is when she started reaching out for some help. So I want to talk a little bit about what was going on behind the scenes, those internal warning lights that Sally was ignoring that led to this point. So our emotions, and stress being one of those emotions. And what can happen when we ignore them? This is often what we do with our emotions. We feel it. We think, oh, I don't have time for this right now. So we mute it, or we shove it down, or we ignore it. So, emotional intelligence, recognizing our emotions, having that self-awareness, that social awareness, what emotions are happening in our environment, that relationship management, self-management, all of those are emotional intelligence competencies, and that ability to recognize and understand and manage and influence our emotions, not only our own, but those of others. And you all know this as healthcare providers. The energy you go into a room with is catchy. The emotions in the room are catchy. So there's a lot of managing of your own emotions, other emotions. We're going to focus for today on the self-awareness piece, the ability to recognize your own feelings, to differentiate between them, to get granular, as Blair was saying, to know why you are feeling those feelings and to recognize the impact it has. Because you can't manage what you can't recognize. So when we're ignoring our signals, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to choose a different response. We go on autopilot, I think, as somebody said in the chat. We just keep moving through, moving through, moving through until one day we get to a breaking point. And part of why we often ignore our emotions, our emotional signals, is because they happen so quickly. So as Blair also said, this is based on predictions that our brain makes. Emotions aren't universal. They're shaped by context and meaning and past experience and sensory input. And so when faced with a situation, our brains don't want to have to analyze everything. So it rapidly generates a prediction about how we should respond. And a really quick example that I like to use to help get this across is I want everybody right now to think about eating a really vinegary bag of salt and vinegar chips. And notice what that does to your mouth. So it's a really quick example of how our brain constructs a physical response. I don't think that at 10:18 in the morning in Ottawa that you are likely to be eating a bag of salt and vinegar chips right now, although no judgment if you are. It's one of my favorite flavors. So our bodies have reacted as if we are eating that bag of chips. And our brain does the same thing with our emotional responses. Situation, prediction, I feel this way. And it happens really, really quickly. And unless you're pausing to notice, you often just kind of ignore what's happening or can ignore what's happening. So in order to start being architects of our emotions, as Lisa Feldman Barrett would say, we need to start getting better at being more granular about what's going on and identifying our emotions. So Blair was also talking about this, that we often default to some really broad labels like I'm feeling burnt out or stressed or tired. But are you able to start digging into, is it overwhelm? Is it disappointed? Is it resentful? Is it frustrated? Um, And I'll just mention that I forgot to at the beginning. You can see on the slides, I've included some resource suggestions specific to kind of each area that I'm talking about. And I've also put those resource suggestions all together on the one of the last slides. So when you get the handouts, you'll have these all available. But if you're interested in exploring this practice of naming emotions, getting really granular, Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart is a really, really good resource for that. But also, there's a free app called How We Feel, which is really good at, you can do a regular check in to identify the feeling, why you're feeling it, and it also offers some strategies for how to attend to that particular emotion. So I just wanted to call those two resources out in particular. But when we get better at naming our emotions as they arise for us, then we're better able to regulate them effectively and choose strategies that support well-being and respond rather than react. And this is so, so important in the work that you're doing in particular, because you are supporting families and patients often at the most vulnerable time of their lives. And as the quote says here, to think that you can be immersed in this day in and day out and not be touched by it is like expecting to walk through water without getting wet. So when you attend to suffering on a regular basis, when you experience strong emotions on a regular basis, all the more important to be aware of the potential accumulation and or suppression of strong emotions. If we keep pushing through and ignoring our emotional signals, there can be a really big cost to that. Because suppressing our emotions really contributes to wearing you down. That habitually hiding feelings increases exhaustion and detachment. Faking it fuels burnout because then you get into performing rather than acknowledging what your experience is. And then this process of ignoring our emotional signals also intensifies what you're feeling so that you're perpetuating this kind of cycle of ongoing stress and ignoring it and pushing through. So what we want to turn to instead is starting to use our emotional signals as data. What is this telling me? What so emotional signals, they're not just warnings, they're directional. That when we can get more practiced at identifying our emotional signals, our warning lights, they can guide us to what matters and what might be off track and what might need a little bit more attention. Because this way, you can start making choices about how you respond. And again, Blair was touching on that, like that whole idea about getting curious, like, oh, I see you. What are you trying to tell me? How can you help me? What can I learn from this? So going back to our story about Sally, she reached a point where she acknowledged the depth and significance of her burnout and the need for something to change. So she sought support and started practicing practical tools and strategies to support her well-being, implementing practices to respond in a different way to emotional signals when they were happening. And I think this is also key as we talk about all of this. recognizing that this is a continuous, non-linear process. And I freely confess that for a long time, in doing some of this work for myself, I had it in my head that there was some kind of mythical finish line that once I got here, everything would be all roses and rainbows. And life doesn't work like that. I understand this. So, just to encourage you that this is a practice and a process that takes experimentation and often um, trying different things to see what works in the moment. And that is all okay. Not only is it all okay, it's good and encouraged because every time we do that, every time we stop and check in with ourselves and identify what we're feeling and figure out what in this moment, going back to how we started, what would make this feel just a little bit better? And moving through that way without trying to get to some kind of mythical finish line. So, we want to get into some of the meat of this. Before we do, maybe I'll just pause here for a moment with both what Blair was saying first thing this morning, some of what I was saying about the importance of recognizing your emotional signals, kind of our brain's predictions, and how we can actually start to change those predictions by noticing our emotional signals, naming them. So does anybody have any questions, anything for clarification before we go into some practical ways that you can notice and name? And you can add those in the chat or feel free to come off mute if you're comfortable doing that. Okay, so that looks good. So noticing, naming, and new ways of responding to our emotional signals. So here's where we're getting into the handout you have. Looks like this, if you were able to print it out. If you weren't, again, pen and paper, or just feel free to think through this as we're talking about it. So first, we're going to talk about noticing. So we're gonna start to collect some data. So think about a challenging situation at work, or maybe an ongoing situation where you feel a lot of strong emotions, or when you notice your stress response being activated. And as you're thinking about it, here's an opportunity again to get really granular. What are you typically feeling? Where do you typically feel it? So I'll use myself as an example of the situation I'm thinking about is feeling really overwhelmed. A lot of things on my to-do list, not being able to get through everything on my to-do list, and just that, overwhelmed feeling of there's no way I can ever get through this. I'm on my own. feeling feeling rather incapable, incompetent sometimes. And in terms of the signs, where do I feel that? When I'm feeling moments of overwhelmed, my body gets tight, my shoulders go up, my jaw is clenched. It's a really, really full body experience overwhelm. And because of that, and often there are tears as my whole body is kind of reacting to what I'm feeling. What am I thinking? Or what are you thinking when you're thinking about the situation that brings up stress or overwhelm or anxiety for you? I'm thinking, oh, I need to get this done. Just one more, push through. I haven't earned my rest yet. Somebody mentioned in the mentioned in the chat, feeling trapped, feeling alone. And also, what are you doing? What are your go-to behaviors? For me in this moment, my go-to behaviors are to buckle down, to work more at a time where probably what I need most is to stop. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So in that moment, my go-to behavior is like pull up my socks, suck it up. Just so push, push, push. So people are adding in the chat. Somebody shared noticing a husband noticing about 5 times yesterday, sighing and not even being aware that you're doing it. So this is a moment maybe to acknowledge that, I'm inviting you to go to a place that's uncomfortable. But if you can just take a moment to collect some of this data in these moments. What are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? What are some of those warning signs? What do you tell yourself? What do you believe to be true? And just capture all of that together. Jot some notes down about how that feels. So it could be physical symptoms. It could be some feelings of detachment, or somebody saying in the chat, disconnection or paralysis, feeling out of alignment, increased irritability. Or you could notice some things like, boundary erosion. Like this is a place where when you're in this spot, like your boundaries are really, really porous. Or you might have some avoidant habits that when you're experiencing these strong emotions, maybe your go-to is to do some doom scrolling or binge watching Netflix or something to numb. So it's all valuable information to notice, because these are some of your warning signs. And so we're not going to stay here. We're going to start talking about then when you're noticing all of these things, what are some alternative responses rather than staying stuck in this default response that we have? And you already were sharing a lot about what you notice in these moments in the chat. So I want to introduce you to the purposeful drill sergeant. Purposeful drill sergeant is what I call these moments of overwhelm. How I notice when I am feeling overwhelmed, when I'm tense, when I'm pushing through says here, drop and give me 10 more. Like that is really the feeling of when the purposeful drill sergeant shows up. And it is my shorthand for when I'm experiencing these moments of overwhelm that help me recognize it more quickly. Oh, hello, drill sergeant. That feeling of push, strive, keep going, keep going. So perpetually tense, always pushing, and committed and responsible. I want to acknowledge that my default mode has developed because I am committed to doing the work and I want to make a contribution. So I say this because we're going to spend some time talking about what your metaphor might be. What name would you give to these feelings that you're noticing, to your default mode? But it's also really important to honor that your default mode developed as a way of serving you. So it's never all bad. There is some really good intention behind this desire to make a good contribution. And I can still do that while taking care of myself. So we're going to play around with naming our way of being when we notice we're responding to stress or to a strong emotion. All of those things that you were listing in the chat, or maybe you were taking notes on the handout. So feeling withdrawn, some negative thinking, making lists, experiencing overwhelmed, more snappy, wanting to run, heaviness in your abdomen. So thinking about all of those feelings, what you notice, and what your intention is. Can you start to come up with a way of naming that? So just like my name for that is when I get into purposeful drill sergeant mode. Can you explore a metaphor for yourself that maybe captures some of that feeling? Now, this is a really odd thing for me to be doing when I can't have a conversation with people. So I invite you to share and explore in the chat, or if there's anyone interested in having a conversation about what you notice and then what a metaphor, what a name for that might be for you. There's anybody willing or interested to do that, I would also be open to that too.
Nadine, Jenny has her hand up. I don't know.
Okay, great. Jenny.
Nadine, um, it may have gotten in the past, I think it may have gotten too far where I wasn't good at naming, kind of getting into that, like you talked about that purposeful drill sergeant. So I get to that point, I did in the past, got to a point where I was so detached. I was floating through my day. I didn't care anymore.
Mm.
I was just here putting time in at my desk. I was avoiding like talking to people and connecting. So I'm having, I can definitely name all of those things from the first step, but for the second step, I don't see at least an idea of that way of being here.
Mm, mm.
because I'd
Mm.
blown through the hey, keep going phase and went straight to nothing matters. I don't care. I'm just here now
Mm.
phase.
Right. So showing up at work, and um can you feel into, kind of what you were what you were hoping for, what what was your intention, if that makes any sense? Just going through the motions, somebody is suggesting. So,
I think maybe
um,
I kind of lost intent or purpose, right?
mhm,
So I think maybe though it was kind of masking or covering, right? So it was expected of me to get out of bed. My family expected me to get out of bed and go to work. My team expected me to clock in and clock out.
yep,
Um, so I was going through the motions of life. So maybe it was kind of like in a way a loose form of accommodating or
yeah,
duty
yeah,
to
or
be here, but I wasn't
dependable.
doing the job. Yeah.
Yeah, dependable. And then I'm thinking of something, because you talked about that kind of floaty, detached. Can you think of something that kind of captures that feeling for you? Like the image that keeps coming to my mind is cloud. But I don't know if that
Yeah.
resonates for you. Like, oh, I'm in dependable cloud mode. I'm going through the motions, but I'm feeling kind of fuzzy.
Yep. No, that kind of rings a bell. Yeah. A
Yeah.
feather, Tammy just put in there too, just kind of blown with the wind, but not sailing my own
Yeah.
ship a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cloud or feather mode. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And this is also a good point. As we play around with this, it doesn't have to be perfect right now,
Mhm.
but it just something to start naming that feeling in a shorthand can help you start like really quickly. Oh, I'm in feather mode
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah.
Because
And
then,
again, I'd hope to get better at recognizing, because I'm sure I went through 100 other phases before I got to
yeah,
that
yeah,
complete non-functioning version of myself, right? So I'd like to get better at this so that I can recognize you know, accepting too many, responsibilities and being the yes girl and being the
yeah,
overachiever and you know, developing pride and sense of self by how many tasks and how many projects and how many things I can accomplish in a quarter.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And so then, and what was coming to mind as you're saying all that is accommodating acrobat,
Yeah,
contorting yourself to like get all of this stuff done. Yeah.
yeah.
And then
So I'd like to be able to recognize that accommodating acrobat phase before I get to the feather phase. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, to keep exploring this, because the more you practice it and the more you notice, because like for me, the purposeful drill sergeant has been my way of being, my default mode that I first started noticing or named almost 3 years ago now. So the purposeful drill sergeant still shows up on a regular basis, but because I've been practicing this for a while now, I notice much more quickly, hello. And I find even just that act of acknowledging it in a silly way. Oh, hello, drill sergeant, I see you, starts to shake me out of that default mode so that I can create a pause for myself. Thank you so much for having that conversation with me, because I think that also helps people start to play around with what might be a metaphor for them. Sue, I see your hand up.
Hi, and sorry that I'm not on video. Um, the 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 metaphor is something that I have used a lot over the course of my life. Um, and but one of the challenges I find lately is to recognize um, my authentic self, because if one in dealing with ongoing stress, one of the things that I will do is remember that people really appreciate my work. And so when I'm overwhelmed by self-doubt, I just say, okay, put on that character that you are, that people seem to appreciate, and you'll make it through the day. But really, I would prefer not to put on the character that people appreciate. I would just prefer to just be myself and be appreciated. And I understand that it's my perception of me, not anybody else's, that is creating this sort of sense of, wait a minute, is this I'm thinking that my authentic self is this exhausted person who can't make a decision because they're overwhelmed, as opposed to the capable person that shows up in front of other people.
I so appreciate you saying that. And we weren't going to focus on this piece today, but I'm realizing how important it is as well. So I'll talk about this a little bit. If we were doing a full coaching program, part of it is naming the school that I trained with is called Integral Coaching Canada. So naming this current way of being, which is what we're doing right now, because we're focused on catching ourselves in our stress response. But the other piece that we do is naming a new way of being. I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but it feels right to talk about it here as well. That if we have the accommodating acrobat or the purposeful drill sergeant, what is our authentic self, our way that we want to be when we're showing up in this work? How does that feel? What do we say to ourselves then? So it's moving from the purposeful drill sergeant to, I'll share mine, which is the delighted alchemist, which has a totally different feeling. It's very personal to me. But it's not about, we're going through this exercise not so that we stay here or we fixate on this. It's just an additional tool so that we can move out of this default mode into your authentic response of who you want to be in this work or how you are in this work. It's just sometimes we lose sight of that when we're stuck in our stress response. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does make sense. And thank you for putting words to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we'll play around with that a little bit later. So for now, because we're talking about burnout and ignoring our warning signals, so we're going to focus a little bit there and then some practices to help us shift out of that. So make sure everybody is kind of at the same point. So it sounds like everybody was pretty comfortable with noticing some of the warning signals, what's happening, how you're feeling, what you're saying to yourself. People are experimenting in the chat with naming what that might be. And I see some awesome ones. Resilient plow driver. Yes. Oh, yes. So you get that, I don't know what your particular warning signals are, but that says a lot about like pushing through all of that mountain of snow, getting it done regardless of toll on you. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything in the chat. Tara, is there anything that I should?
I think you've done a great job, Nadine. You're very much on top of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scattered multitasker. Um, Somebody has suggested, and so I would encourage you, because scattered multitasker may be both quite similar, to think of something like uh on either side of that, like so maybe you're the earnest multitasker, like you're trying to get a whole bunch of things done with the best of intentions, but something to, again, in our default modes, it's there for a reason. It's helped us get things done.
Yeah. The commenter came back, Nadine, with the earnest hummingbird.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Um, and I want to share that a lot of these are on here because it's a combination of different ways of being from various clients that I've worked with. And I did have somebody who was very much a hummingbird, very not stopping, going very fast, from flower to flower, work to work. Earnest hummingbird, lovely metaphor. Mrs. Fix-It, reliable workhorse. These are all wonderful. So how does that feel for everybody? Does it give you a sense of, oh, I'm going into Energizer rabbit mode? Or I had somebody who the metaphor that most resonated for her was roadrunner, committed roadrunner. But when she was feeling that stressed and wanting to run away, and somebody mentioned that in the chat, and we're going to get into some practices in a minute. But so her first practice when she'd noticed going into roadrunner mode was to go meep, meep, again as a way of disrupting. Oh, this is ridiculous. Ah, yes. Okay. I can choose a different response now.
Yeah, Nadine, can I just throw something in there? Because
Yeah.
maybe other people felt this too. Is when I first did this exercise with you, like I noticed a lot of resistance in naming a second metaphor. I think some of us get so like caught up on like continuing to exist the way we've been existing, right? So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts how to sort of help us move from the initial metaphor, which is the way we've been living potentially,
Mm.
into.
Well, I think that's why when working with people, to make sure that we don't fixate on like a kind of an exclusively negative way of being. There is always something to honor in how we've typically approached this, and focusing on the honoring piece, all of the things that are good about being a dutiful soldier. And how do we carry that with us, incorporate it in a different way of approaching it?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, joyful juggler
Hello.
as a new way of
How are
responding to
you?
accommodating acrobat. Oh, I love that. Yes, and depending on how I feel. And so you can start to have different metaphors for different situations, as is said there. Sometimes you're being the acrobat, sometimes you're being the purposeful drill sergeant. It depends on context. But so to start with thinking about your primary stress response and your primary name for that, and it's feeling like everybody is okay with moving ahead, but I see Karina has their hand up.
Hi, Nadine. I have a question because I was the one who put in the scattered multitasker to the earnest hummingbird.
Mm.
And how do you let go of these metaphorical energies when they serve you? When it gets the task done?
Yeah.
Yes, I collapse and need a nap after, but how do you let go of these metaphorical energies that actually help you in a way?
Yes. So that's connected a little bit to what I was saying to Tara about the importance of honoring these default modes are there for a reason. They have served us, but they're no longer serving us in a way that that is that's how we want to approach it. So yes, you get things done, but if you collapse at the end of it, you want to shift into an approach that where you're still getting things done in a way that doesn't lead to your collapse. And so what are all the good things about being that multitasker, that hummingbird with, high energy and being able to connect so many different things and, um, retaining that while also, taking care of your well-being. And it is possible to shift into that way. So we'll talk a little bit about that next. Some of the practices where you can shift into, still getting stuff done. We all still have to get stuff done. But can we do it in a different way where we're not also sacrificing our own well-being while we do it? So, trying out a new way. So we want to practice noticing all of our warning signals, all of our emotional signals. Metaphor is a way that can help us do that in a relatively quick way, and it gets faster and faster the more you practice it. So, hello, purposeful drill sergeant. I see you now. Still want to get things done without sacrificing my well-being. What can I do in this moment to make this just a little bit better? So on your handout, you'll notice I've outlined some practice ideas for different responses, depending on how you're feeling, depending on what's coming up. So I'll just walk you through, for me last week, recognizing I had multiple deadlines, very long to-do list. At my desk, noticing the purposeful drill sergeant is here. Hunched over, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, all of the joy sucked right out of the work. I'm like, and I caught myself saying, okay, I'll just finish this. I'll just finish this. Oh, okay. Checking in. I'm feeling really frustrated. Figuring out exactly what is the feeling, because it was taking me so much longer than I had budgeted for to get this particular project done. Acknowledging that, oh, I'm really frustrated. What do I need? I need to get up and move, go make a cup of tea, get away from my desk, and just create a little pause. In that pause, while I'm making my cup of tea, think, okay, what do I need to get done? When do I have to get it done by? What is a plan that will serve me? You know what? I can take 15 minutes and go for a walk around the block. Come back, get it done, but no longer hunched over and tight at my desk. That, taking a pause and then a longer pause so that I could unclench and breathe in some fresh air and talk myself through it and really reflect on, okay, realistically, what do I have to get done versus, do I really have to do all 6 things on my to-do list? So using a number of different practices to get myself back to a place where I'm still getting my work done, but with a completely different feeling and approach, no longer tight and pushing through it. So I'll share some practice ideas that, depending on what you're working on or what you want to, the different feeling or approach that you want to cultivate. So one thing I call dump, delegate, or defer. And I often use this when I am feeling overwhelmed my to-do list. Because that old adage that if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. But I usually need time to sort through, okay, what do I really need to finish? And I'm notorious with myself of like having a to-do list that's 20 items long that I know is not going to be possible to get done in a day. So can I go through my to-do list? What is the priority? What am I going to do? Is there something I can dump? Even if just for the day, like, oh, I am not going to touch this. I actually can work on that next week. Is there anything I can delegate someone to? And just experimenting with working through your to-do list in this way, so that you can focus your energy on what is the real priority. So I'm noticing somebody mentioning in the chat that not everybody can escape to the bathroom, or not everybody can escape to the bathroom. I'm reading 2 chats together. That not everybody can leave work for a 15-minute walk. Absolutely. When you don't have a chance to just take a break and leave. So what is the smallest version of that you could give yourself in the moment, and then make a plan for something a little bit more fulsome when you have time? And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But a lot of this is for you to determine for yourself where you're at with what you're feeling. Again, what one little thing would make this just a little bit better. And somebody's sharing that needing to be very intentional with my breaks and not go to the break room because it was all negative energy. So that I think, thank you for that, because it reinforces that this is exploring, experimenting with things that help you in the moment and making a plan for maybe some more in-depth practices for when you have some more time. So maybe you can't go for a 15-minute break now, but can you take a pause of 10 breaths before the next patient? So dump, defer, delegate is one idea for feeling overwhelmed. Self-compassion break. And this is something perhaps for if you're at work, you don't have time to go out for a 15-minute walk, or you don't have a lot of time, because you can do this in quite a short period of time. And I want to acknowledge that this is from Dr. Kristen Neff's work and Chris Germer. There's a lot of really good resources on self-compassion. And I also want to mention, because Dr. Kimberly Sogi is talking later on in Wellness Day, and I've had the opportunity to do a self-compassion course or program with her. So there are lots of ways of exploring self-compassion and integrating this into your day. So self-compassion break is just this paying attention. So noticing, oh, this is a moment of stress. And the common humanity of, everybody feels like this at times, or I'm not alone, or this is very human, very normal. And then giving yourself some kindness. And as I talk about this, my hand automatically goes on my heart. But experimenting, even with this practice of noticing, and then what words, um, what words feel good to you? How do you acknowledge? How do you recognize common humanity? How do you show yourself kindness and talk to yourself as you would a friend? And if you have difficulty identifying some language to use for yourself, that could be a really helpful practice as well to, maybe you can't find the words to say to yourself, but what would you say to your best friend who was experiencing this kind of stress? And then say those words to yourself. So self-compassion breaks when you notice your inner critic showing up, or when you catch yourself saying unkind things to yourself, can be really, really helpful and can be done really quickly. And if you want to listen to a recorded version of that practice so that you can practice kind of the steps in a self-compassion break, there are recordings available on the website at selfcompassion.org. Blair was talking about burnout and acknowledging that all of the systemic pressures that perhaps are not within our own control. But when you find yourselves noticing that you need or want to speak up for yourself, another helpful practice is compassionate communication framework, or nonviolent communication framework. You might have heard it described as, and I've tried to choose practices here that also point you to other resources so that you can go and explore it in more detail. But to use this as a framework to help when you need to speak up for yourself, because it helps you focus again on your feelings, your observations, your needs. And sometimes this can feel really awkward, but as you practice it, it becomes easier and more natural way of expressing yourself. And then another suggested potential practice is around knowing your limits. So setting some boundaries around, let's take screen time, for example. If you notice one of your behaviors is around, maybe kind of numbing or checking out by spending a lot of time on social media, is there a way of setting upper and lower limits for yourself so that you can put some parameters around it and manage it that way? And making it easier for yourself by using like parental control features on your phone, so that, it starts to tell you, oh, you've only got 10 minutes of screen time left. So experimenting, and I use that word a lot because all of this, these are just suggestions for you to take and explore what works for you and what works for you given the context. Because sometimes it'll be different, or you'll go to, oh, this happened to me last night, dealing with a situation, all kinds of activation. Oh, I need a little self-compassion break. And after 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, I'm still, I'm still not feeling it. So trying different things, until eventually I was able to feel kind of regulated and acknowledge how I was feeling and how I wanted to respond next. Laura, you have a question.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to just, when you talk about self-compassion breaks and your loud inner critic, one of the things that Mel Robbins had suggested was naming your inner critic. And I found, so I apologize if anybody's named Harper, but I don't have any volunteers named Harper, so that's the name I went with. And so, when I tell myself I'm, stupid or I've done something stupid, just telling Harper to go away and to leave me alone, or it makes you more aware of how often you're criticizing yourself. And, you may sound a little crazy talking to yourself, but it just helps to identify, and you're shutting it down right away. So instead of it continuing that beating yourself up, you're instantly sort of identifying that you have had negative talk, self-talk, and said, stop it. That's enough. We're not doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's worked for me.
Absolutely. And that's what all of this is about. So you're noticing, oh, inner critic, named it Harper. Hello, Harper, I see you. Choosing a different response. That's exactly what this suggested practice is. So as you can probably gather, I'm a big fan of naming things as again, a shorthand of recognizing when I'm getting into different default modes. So one of my others, this is in particular around feeling doubt or feeling critical, hypercritical of myself. Beetlejuice is the name of my really vocal inner critic, because if you say Beetlejuice 3 times out loud, it goes away. And again, it disrupts that now doubt, that critical thought, because how ridiculous is it for me to be sitting in my office saying Beetlejuice out loud to myself? So it's just noticing, naming, however that works for you, choosing a different response. So on the handout, it goes into more detail about some of these suggested practice ideas, depending on kind of how you're feeling and what you want to shift into. And the other practice I wanted to share is around this practice of calm check-ins. And this is something that I find really helpful to kind of sprinkle throughout my day, and it kind of pulls a lot of the things that we've been talking about together. So I encourage you all to kind of choose a practice that we've just spoken about that, something that's kind of resonating for you. And then soon we're going to just like, again, try and put this all together and outline a plan for how you can practice this. And then to come up with some reflection questions and ways to experiment with this. And I love this. Sometimes you feel like you're dropping balls and too busy. It's like sitting in a ball pit. Oh, that is a great metaphor and image. And so for Big Bang Theory fans, I say bazinga. Oh, I'm going to use that. That's awesome. Thank you. So, practice of calm, which as you can see around the outside, checking in, acknowledging, listening, making a plan. So the check-in. We've been talking a lot about this, and Blair was talking about this, that noticing without judgment your stressors, your stress responses. What's happening? Where am I feeling it? How am I feeling? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, high energy, low energy? So checking in and then acknowledging this is whatever that might be. There is a lot of really interesting research around how this process of acknowledging starts right there to help calm things down. This name it to tame it idea, so that you can get to a place where you can choose a compassionate response for yourself. So the L in calm is listening. What do I need? And what you might need is dependent on the situation and how you're feeling. It could be like often when I ask myself this, oh, what do you need? Oh, you need some water. And I realize I have not moved from my desk or had any water today. Or maybe you need to rest. And it might not be possible to have a nap right now, but to acknowledge that, oh, I need to rest. And what could that look like for me? Or maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to connect with somebody or talk to somebody or reach out to a friend or talk to a colleague. Maybe you need to go to the bathroom. Because the longer you wait to go to the bathroom or the longer you wait to drink or eat or move, the longer your body stays in its stress response. Or maybe you need to get some more information and explore with curiosity, what other information or resources do I need that would be helpful in this situation? You'll find that as you practice this, as you listen to what you need, again, that the answers will start coming up more and more quickly. And to trust what your body is telling you, what your emotions are telling you. Again, using those emotional signals as data. What do I need to do with this information? So that you can make a plan. So I keep going back to this whole idea of what one little thing would make this just a little bit better in this moment. And then maybe what do I need to make time for later? I can't call my best friend right now and have a good vent session. But what could I do right now? Oh, even if I can just find a quiet corner and have a little stretch and take a few deep breaths, and I'm going to plan to call my friend as I'm driving home from work. So what can you do for yourself right now? What do you maybe need to plan to do for later? Is just, and again, this can be fairly quick, just a regular way of checking in with yourself. How am I feeling? What do I need? making a plan to do it. So just make sure I haven't missed anything in the chat. Somebody is stealing the Beetlejuice idea. Beetlejuice, Bazinga. I have a whole new set of names for this talk. So putting it all together, making a plan to practice. So again, on the handout, there's a spot for this, or if you just have paper and pen close by, just to jot down in one place, kind of, here are some of my warning signals. Here's what I'm working with right now for my naming metaphor, my default mode. And here are some of my, here's a practice I want to try. Here is a new way of approaching this that I want to try. So for example, your warning signals might be negative self-talk, tension in your shoulders, frustration. Your default mode is dedicated judge. So I'm going to practice when I notice the dedicated judge, or when I notice Harper, some self-compassion and some reframing. And then, how am I going to practice it? It's all well and good to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But it's helpful to also start to work through a way of practicing. So whenever, I will practice self-compassion whenever I notice the dedicated judge, being self-critical, so that I can cultivate some kindness for myself instead. And as you think about how I'm going to practice this, is there a way you can make it obvious? Is there a way you can make it easy? Is there something that regularly happens that you could kind of attach it to? So for example, if I'm doing a calm check-in, I do that while I'm waiting for my morning coffee. Standing here in the kitchen, just going to check in with myself. How am I feeling? Actually, I'm kind of excited for my day. Is there anything I need right now? What would make this just a little bit better? My coffee will make it just a little bit better. But then, because I'm feeling good and I'm checking in and getting my coffee, I'm going to make a plan to just really savor this and start my day off by nurturing myself. So thinking about with whatever you're going to practice, is there something you can attach it to? Is there a regular situation? Is there a regular, like Tara and I have both been involved in the mindfulness informed end of life care program. And one of the things we talk about there is a threshold practice, that before you go into the next room, so that's what you're anchoring into. Is there a practice around, I'm going to check in, what do I need? Okay, I haven't had a break. I've been go, 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 go. Okay, I'm going to attend to what I need to now. Afterwards, I'm going to go have my lunch. So every threshold, few deep breaths, quick check-in. What's the energy I'm bringing in with me into the room? If you're in home care, maybe before you go into the next home. And then again, as you're leaving. So looking at planning to practice and ways of doing that in a way that makes it as easy for yourself as possible. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any comments? Any thoughts about as you put it all together, anything coming up around wanting to get more clear on the noticing, naming, or potential new ways? Yes, the handouts will be available after the session, so you can print them out then. Okay. So the other thing I want to encourage you to do as you're practicing is maybe you're going to experiment with self-compassion breaks. Then to notice, how did I feel before and how did I feel after? Did I experience any barriers? Is there anything that I could do to adjust how I do this that would make it easier? What can I do to make it more effective for me? So just choosing a couple questions that as you practice to check in with yourself again, like, okay, did this give me what I need? Is there anything else I need to do? Is there anything else I could try? Because sometimes you might find, okay, I'm experiencing something, take a few deep breaths. Oh, I'm still feeling agitated. Okay, I'm going to try and reframe this situation. Oh, I'm still feeling a little okay, I'm going to try a self-compassion break. But to practice different things, experiment with different things so that you can get to the place where you feel more comfortable, more at ease. And I'm just watching in the chat. Reconnecting with that, trust yourself with what you need. It's like we've lost that connection to self. And thank you so much for acknowledging that, because these practices, the more you do them, the more you start to trust that that you can tend to yourself in the way that you need to, that you can pay attention to all of these signals and choose different responses that will serve you, again, so that you're not sacrificing yourself in the beautiful work that you do. You deserve to be on the list. You deserve to check in with yourself and give yourself what you need.
And Nadine, if I could throw in there, and I think the more we talk about it, in settings like this and otherwise, the more we, normalize it and empower each other to do it also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And somebody is suggesting the Good Trade as a daily email that sets the tone of the day, has lots of helpful content that if you notice in your default mode that that sometimes it's uh, uh, practices, or your default mode includes, kind of numbing or doom scrolling or things like that, that you can curate your feed and try, maybe you don't want to get rid of your phone entirely, but can you absorb some of the good as opposed to focusing on some of the doom scrolling that, like, what is it that you want to feed? And you can again experiment with that.
There's a hand up, Nadine.
Okay, yes, Sue.
Hi, I want to thank you for that reminder about the threshold practice. And it reminds me of a personal story of my own that I'm going to try to keep close to me in terms of visualizing my day. When I was younger, I used to do quite a bit of downhill skiing. And I got into the practice of, when I was at the top of a run, particularly if it was a run that I was unfamiliar with and maybe a little nervous about, that I would stop and I would do a check of my body and just make sure that I was in a good starting form. You
Oh,
know, that my feet felt that they were on the hill, that the rest of my body felt like it was, appropriately aligned on top of my feet. And because once you start going, you don't really have the option to adjust without stopping.
yeah.
So, and I found, and like I'm talking about being a youngster here, like in my teens, that if I did that, I would most likely have a much better run. And if I didn't do it, I would not have, I would have not a great run. So, for me, that threshold practice, I'll remind myself, remember how it felt to be at the top of that hill.
Yeah. I love that. Um, and I'm thinking, maybe there's a new way of being metaphor in there for you that in a good starting form, something about, black diamond skier, the attentive black diamond skier. But just that starting out the way that you want to move through the rest of your day, and some of these practices, you can sprinkle in as a way of being in good starting form. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we've noticed, we've named, chosen some practices that we want to experiment with, and we're going to reflect and experiment some more. So this gets a little bit again into, what is the feeling that you want to cultivate? Don't want to stay in purposeful drill sergeant mode. Still want to get things done. How can I do this with more delight, with more lightness, with more calm is not the right word. Yeah, lightness is what keeps coming up for me, because the counterbalance to feeling all tight and hunched is my intention to approach this with a lightness of being. So what would help me cultivate that? So to experiment with your own practices. What would help you be in good starting form? So sometimes, maybe you don't have time for a 15-minute walk. Is it possible to listen to a 2-minute energizing song, maybe with a little wiggle in there? Exercise snacks. I figure my purposeful drill sergeant is often telling me to drop and give me 10. So sometimes if I want to disrupt that, I do some wall push-ups as a way of moving my body and disrupting that default mode. Or moments of delight. Can you cultivate, like what I was saying with my morning coffee? I have this little ritual with my morning coffee. I also have what I call my breakfast chocolate. I love chocolate covered ginger that I get from Anna Stuba Chocolates in Ottawa, if anybody is interested. And I start my morning with my coffee, savoring that first sip, and feeling the warmth of the mug in my hands, and smelling the coffee and savoring my chocolate. And then starting from this good form, how do I want my day to be? What's the energy I want to bring? How do I want to move through my day with delight? And so to invite you to, as you explore this, come up with a metaphor that helps capture that. So we spent some time naming our default mode, our current way of being. Can you come up with a new way of being metaphor that can help you start your day or remind you as you're noticing your stress response, I can still get things done, and I can do it in this way instead. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've still got quite a bit more time left, so we'll have lots of time for questions and answers if people want, or you might have extra time for lunch, which is also not a bad thing. So just to summarize, we all have emotional signals or stress responses, and oftentimes, and often we've been taught that the way of managing them is to push through, is to ignore. But the more we ignore our emotional signals, the more likelihood that we will find ourselves in distress or feeling depleted, because that chronic stress and staying stuck in that default mode can be really, really harmful for our health and well-being. So if we practice noticing and naming emotions as accurately as we can, using metaphor as a tool that can help you notice and name your default modes, and can also help you name the way of being that you want to integrate, the enthused architect, energized and happy about designing your own life, and practicing integrating these new approaches, these new responses, seeing what works for you, reflecting on, does it help you get closer to the way of being that you want to cultivate? Is there anything that I can adjust in that? Can I try something else? What is the feeling that I want to cultivate as a counterbalance to staying in my stress mode? So out of curiosity, and everybody has been so generous in sharing in the chat, thank you. Curious, what is your intention for what you're going to practice? Oh, and I'm seeing some new way metaphors as well. The aligned artist. So is there any particular practice that is resonating either from the handout or from thinking about the feeling that you want to cultivate? Maybe the enthused architect has a practice of after every item on your to-do list, you get to doodle something, buy yourself a whole bunch of beautiful, colorful markers. And I say this because I have a little obsession with colorful markers and colorful pens, but that can be a practice. The aligned architect maybe loves to doodle. Lower limits for non-negotiables. Pause, breathe into reposition. And Sue, thank you again for sharing being in good starting form. I'm going to keep that one. So, as I mentioned, here are a lot of the resources that I mentioned, and the slides will be sent as a handout. So you'll have these handy. I've tried to integrate a number of different resources depending on what you're interested in exploring. So all of the interesting neuroscience around how emotions are made and how our brain works. I've included some things there. I love permission to feel and dealing with feeling. And Dr. Mark Brackett also has the How We Feel app, which is a great way of checking in with yourself and exploring some practices that are suggested depending on how you're feeling as you've identified in that check-in. The Healthy Minds program app is also a wonderful, it is a program which gives you some guided meditations, a little bit of learning around why this practice, and both of those are free. So again, it's the Healthy Minds program app and the How We Feel app. And I've also included some things there around habit building because this is a habit, just like our default mode, our staying in a stress response can be a habit where we get stuck there. We can cultivate new habits to move into a different way of being, to cultivate what we want while still getting things done and caring for ourselves at the same time. So there might be some interesting things in there for you as well. And when Kate and I were planning this session and talking about this, she mentioned this a couple times, and we've talked about this. I want to stress with all of it, half-assing it counts. Half-assing it totally counts. Because even if you're doing the tiniest version of a practice, you're still sending yourself the signal that I am acknowledging this is how I'm feeling, this is what I need, and I'm doing the smallest version of that possible. Half-assing counts. So, again, we have some time for questions, clarification, any thoughts, anything people want to share.
Can I just go ahead? I'm not being very well harnessed by the facilitator. Um, I was thinking, in Blair's talk, people were talking about the challenge of the social context at work. And I was wondering if some of the compassionate communication, you gave lots of great examples about how to use some of this stuff, but I wonder if some of the compassionate communication tricks and tips couldn't be harnessed with some of the workplace and talking to colleagues about what you need to be feeling better in the context of your work world. Recognizing it's not easy, but I thought maybe could you talk through maybe an example or something where that could be harnessed in that way?
Yeah. And Tara, please feel free to jump in because I know you've also done a lot of work around nonviolent communication. But it is a really helpful framework to use because it can take the defensiveness out of the conversation that you're observing, I'm being asked to do more with less, and I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I need to understand what the priority is right now. Could we have a team meeting to talk about what is the most pressing issue in this moment?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nadine and Val. But, I'm glad you brought it up because I noticed somewhere in the comments somebody's mentioned feeling okay about having needs, and that was exactly what came to mind for me. Also, is that like I think it's so powerful to just recognize even that piece that having needs is human, right? I feel like there's been a lot of conditioning to suppress our needs, and because of health systems and the demands on individuals to do more with less, as Blair talked about. But yeah, just recognizing human beings have needs. right? So naming those needs and finding ways to use communication to talk to our coworkers, you know, about what those needs are in a way that is compassionate and doesn't bring up judgment or defensiveness is so important.
Because organizations also get stuck in their stress response as well. It becomes really hard to take the eagle eye view of what's happening when you're immersed in processes, and that you know that somebody had the metaphor around the hummingbird, the committed hummingbird, or whatever. You know, you want to provide good care, and you've got a lot on your plate, and you're dealing with emotionally tough situations, and organizationally it's really hard to find the pause button so that everybody can take a step back and say, how are we approaching the work, and can we do it in a way that's more supportive and sustainable? And so talking from, first of all, your needs in a compassionate way can help to start the ball rolling for some of those organizational conversations too. Tammy and then Karina.
Hi, I just wanted to share. I read a book lately. It's by Bruce Willis's wife, actually, Emma Hemming Willis, and it's about her journey through his FTD diagnosis and as a caregiver. And one of the things, and I wrote it down because I was like, it really stuck out to me. And for those who feel like they're trying to get everything done and everything's and I know it's easier said than done, but it's good as a reminder to have it posted. So it says in there, and she had an Oprah interview too, it says, make a list of all you do that doesn't have to be done by you. And when someone offers to help, or when you feel overwhelmed, you can delegate those tasks, right? Because we do a lot, yes, but does it all have to be done by us, or can we ask someone to do it on our behalf? And as a caregiver, that could be, you know, putting on the winter tires, bringing it to the garage, driving your car to the garage for the winter tires, picking up medication, oil changes, things like that. But at work, it could also be just if someone says, you know, if you are feeling overwhelmed and you ask for help and someone says, what can I do? You might have a list already ready. So you don't have to say, let me think about it, you know?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So you don't have to struggle in the moment. And, you know, and that's also a practice, asking for help and trying every day, big or small, asking for help if that's something that you want to work towards. I don't know what it's bringing to mind for me is the number of times I've angry cleaned the kitchen when I could have just asked for some help. I just wanted to cover a couple things in the chat. One person suggesting calling it, or preferring to call it, half passing, which is actually, it's very nice way of saying it. Good enough for now. And I sometimes find myself saying that, you know, what's good enough, or good enough for now, and as a way of helping to move on and reframe. Somebody was mentioning that they thought the How We Feel app is only for iPhone, but I have an Android, so it's available for Android as well. And making sure I didn't miss anything else. What's good enough when you are a perfectionist? So that is why good enough for now is a really helpful addition. Because you give yourself the possibility of, you know, maybe I'll come back to it, but what's good enough for now? Pause, regroup, take a few deep breaths, then decide how I want to approach it. Because it can be easy to get, because that's a little bit with the purposeful drill sergeant as well, has a few perfectionist tendencies as well. So good enough for now can be a helpful reframe that allows you to move on.
Thank you, Nadine.
Breaths.
Yeah, if I could just say on behalf of everyone, I imagine that it was a fast 2 hours, an amazing 2 hours, and I think I certainly feel, and I imagine other people feel like very lovingly held through that time together. So I really appreciate you guiding us and making this an environment that felt safe for sharing, and that we walk away with some practical tools to continue to engage in wellness, hoping to contribute to new ways of being. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being so generous in your sharing, being brave. I love some of the metaphors. I have some new ideas for practices as well. So really appreciate that.